So I've been playing the network test for Code Vein. None of my friends are playing it, and I think I have more to say than I could reasonably post on Twitter, so I figured I'd make a really quick video to just go over my thoughts, both to organize them myself and to show the game off to some people who may have been curious but a little unsure if it's really going to be for them. So, first things first, as you can probably see already, this game is anime as hell. We've been making jokes about it being anime Souls since it was first revealed, and that holds pretty true in every sense. Obviously, on a surface level, that means the game has an anime art style and some really ridiculous outfits, but beyond that too, the story and writing just feel very anime in tone. One of the darker, edgier animes, to be fair, but it's still something that if you're not a fan of, you might want to stay away. Speaking of the story, I think that's the main thing that surprised me about this game. There's a lot more of it than I expected. I guess I should establish for anyone who may not be aware, but I'm a pretty big fan of the Souls series, my favorite of which being Bloodborne. But I've never really played any of the Souls-like games made by other developers, and I've never played any of the other games made by this team specifically either, so I really wasn't sure what to expect going into this. There's a lot of cutscenes and dialogue, and a lot of it is pretty cliche stuff about amnesia and the special power the main character has to save the world, but there's a few moments that work. I liked that after killing the boss, there's a short moment where you walk through his memories. If they keep that kind of thing up for at least all of the major bosses in the game, I'll be pretty happy about it. But overall, the story is the biggest thing I'm hesitant about with this one. I can't say I'm entirely sold just yet. Before you even get into the story though, there's the character creator. And I have to say, here I'm very impressed. There's a lot of customization here, perhaps too much in some places. There's like 50 eyebrows to choose from. But overall, there's a lot of ways to make the exact anime character you want to play as, and I can easily see some people losing several hours into just this part of the game. Once the character creation and opening story segments are done, the demo throws you into the prologue section of the game. I do need to keep in mind that this is supposed to be the first area, so I'm not going to judge it too much on a few aspects. For example, I found this place to be way too easy, too linear for most of it, and kind of dull to look at. But as a tutorial area, I think maybe all of that is a good thing, because this game throws a lot of concepts at you right away, and as a veteran Souls player especially, it may take a bit of time to adjust to what's different here. That's one of the real problems with copying a specific game directly. I mean, don't get me wrong, I know Souls didn't invent a lot of the concepts people attribute to it, but the clear influence here is blatant. They knew what they were doing, so when things aren't as good as the game they're copying, it's harder to forgive. The core combat of attacking and dodging don't feel quite as good here as Bloodborne, for example, and I was initially disappointed that you just leveled up overall and couldn't choose which stats to level up specifically. But as I played further into the demo, those changes started to make a lot more sense, because while superficially this game is a Souls clone, underneath that it's a lot more unique. For one thing, this game doesn't ever seem to limit you to the type of gameplay you want to be playing. You will definitely be tailoring yourself towards specific builds, but the core of those builds are things you can swap out seemingly at any time. These blood codes are basically equipable builds, comparable to jobs or classes in other RPGs outside of Souls-likes. So while at one moment you may be playing a heavy, weapy-wielding berserker, a few seconds in the menu will swap you out to a dexterity-based ranged attacker. It's obviously too early to tell, but I suspect this will lend itself less to the multiple playthroughs the Souls series itself thrives on, and more to building up your main character in as many ways as you can. That being said, there's a refreshing amount of customization at play here. The game focuses a lot more on buffs and special moves than the Souls series does. Every code has special abilities, passive traits, and various buffs to unlock. Spending time on that playstyle will lead you to mastering those moves, at which point you are allowed to carry them over to other codes. So, for example, if there's a code with a playstyle you dislike, but it has a good defense buff you want, playing with that style until you master the buff will then allow you to bring the buff onto the code you actually want to use. Given that some moves are for specific weapon types and other moves and buffs synergize well with each other, I see serious potential in how fun it'll be to build your character up in the final game. Of course, that all depends on how much variety is actually on offer. Thankfully, the stress test does let you experience what the game will be like a bit further in. Once you are done with the simple prologue area, they give you access to a zone made especially for the network test. Here, you are thrown into a level 40 zone with high-level enemies that give increased experience to let you level up quickly in the demo. They also unlock a bunch of different codes and partners to utilize. Oh yeah, I hadn't talked about partners yet. It's another mechanic I'm somewhat mixed on. They felt really overpowered for the prologue area, but when I was a level 10 character thrown into a level 40 area, they felt more justified. They basically end up feeling exactly like playing a Souls game with an NPC summon out at all times. Their AI seems a little basic, they attack enemies once they've been aggroed, and their best usage is as a distraction, so you can get back attacks and heal safely. They'll also heal you if you die a few times, which feels a bit overpowered. During the story segment, they also talk a lot, which really ruined the atmosphere for me. I'm okay if they were going for a different atmosphere than Souls, but there's a small section of the prologue where you are without a partner, and I ended up enjoying the pacing and feel of that part a lot more, which makes me a little nervous about playing the whole game with a partner. I did notice that once you get to the optional level 40 area, you can choose to go it alone with no partner at all. Hopefully in the main game that option is there for the whole story, for people that want a greater challenge. Okay, so I'm going to interject real quick here. This part is not scripted, so it's going to be a little bit different in the flow. I just played through the demo a second time to get footage for this video itself, and I made the choice when you meet the second partner that you get in the demo to not partner up with him. I noticed the choice there the first time I played through, but I didn't really think anything of it. I figured it would just force you into it, and I honestly forgot that the choice was even there when I originally scripted this video. But this time through, I chose not to take him with me. And it actually does make that the rest of that first story area feel a lot closer to a Souls game in terms of pacing and difficulty. Obviously, it's still a first area, so it wasn't like hard at all. But there's a part where you get to a room with a bunch of enemies, and I actually found it a lot more difficult than just going through with a partner the first time. So that actually does have me even more excited for this game than before. Like I said, I don't need this to feel like Dark Souls. It's okay if it wants to do its own thing, and a lot of the mechanics do seem built around having a partner character. Like, there's partner-specific skills that I forgot to mention the first time as well. But at the same time, too, I do, when I come to a game like this, I would prefer more of a challenge, and I think the atmosphere lends itself well to that kind of solo exploration. So, yeah, playing through without that partner in the second half made that whole second half of the story area feel a lot better. However, when you get to the boss and that character needs to show up for a cutscene, he just is there. Like, he just shows up and then joins you for the boss anyway. So I don't think that that's actually going to be like a big thing where, oh, you can actually play through the whole game without a partner. I still think they're going to force a partner on you for most of it. Especially in the bosses, it's like I did not have a choice to fight that boss without a partner, which I thought kind of lame. I mean, maybe if I were to go back to the not bonfire, I could choose to not take a partner after getting him. I didn't try that, so maybe you can, but it still seems like in story segments, they're going to just show up and still be there in your party, so that's something. Okay, that's all I have to do for this quick interjection. Back to the original script. Outside of the NPC partners, though, that optional area definitely left a pretty good impression. You start at the center and have branching paths literally everywhere. Your goal is to defeat multiple bosses to obtain keys to unlock a door. I haven't finished it yet, since I wanted to get my thoughts out here while they're fresh, but so far I've had a lot of fun messing around in this section of the game. If most of the main game is supposed to be this as opposed to like the prologue, I'm pretty excited. Although it does have to be said that I haven't really been impressed with the bosses I've seen so far. Dodging and blocking them doesn't feel quite as good as in Souls, and they all have felt pretty generic so far. But we'll just have to see if that's actually a problem in the main game or not. I think the only other thing I really want to mention is the online. When the game was first announced, I wasn't sure what the online would be like, or if it would even have any at all. In the end, it's basically the same as Souls co-op. You either call for help or seek out others to help you. With both a player summon and an NPC helper, you make a pretty strong team, so if the co-op in this game is going to thrive, I hope there's a lot of really difficult optional areas and bosses similar to the feel of the optional zone here. Otherwise, I don't see people needing help quite as much as in Souls, especially since there doesn't seem to be an equivalent of the Invader system or any PvP at all to speak of. I did also run into a few technical issues. There's definitely some frame rate and slowdown issues in a few parts, and I'd hesitate to spend quite as much time smashing open all the boxes in this game because of it. I also found that the online overall was a bit sluggish compared to playing offline, which is hopefully something this network test will help them fix. I also had a crash happen during the long story cutscene after the boss, and reloading the game sent me back to the last checkpoint, with the boss still alive. Not an issue for the first boss, but if there's going to be story scenes after more difficult bosses, I can see that being pretty upsetting if it happens again. I think that's all I really have to say about this so far. I'm not entirely sold on every aspect of the game, but there's also a lot of really fun stuff going on here, and I can see it turning out to be a pretty good game. At the very least, I'm intrigued enough to check the full game out. Whenever it does happen to come out, that is.